The term pinkwashing has a long history. Originally, it was coined in reference to companies that produced products decorated with pink ribbons, signifying a support for breast cancer awareness, when in reality many of these companies did nothing to actually contribute to breast cancer-related causes. Many of them even produced products containing ingredients linked to a higher risk of breast cancer. In effect, pinkwashing was used to describe a corporation's hypocrisy, profiting from the outward appearance of social awareness while ignoring or even exacerbating the problem itself. The term is also used in the context of LGBT activism in a very similar way. Even if a company turns its logo rainbow-colored for Pride Month and pays lip service to the queer community, that doesn't necessarily mean that the company actually does anything to actually help LGBT people. In fact, they may even play an active role in harming them. Enter YouTube, the proverbial hand that feeds me. There's a good chance you're already aware of this situation to some degree, but here it is in a nutshell. Carlos Maza is the host and producer of Strikethrough, a video series for Vox.com that explores the challenges faced by modern news media. For the past couple years, conservative commentator Steven Crowder has produced a series of videos ostensibly debunking Maza's work, but mostly acting as a vehicle for homophobic insults.
Okay, so the little queer could eat his chips all nonchalantly. It's code for rape, Mr. Queer eating chips on the Vox channel.
Chip, 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 but you can eat just one. Like dicks.
This is what Mr. Gay Vox wants to do. Mr. Lispy Queer from Vox. He just sachets across without, the Gay Vox Sprite is wrong!
Now he could be a tranny, Your Honor.
How many lispy, angry sprites and Vox sachet across your screen and try and tell you otherwise?
Since Crowder has spent years cultivating the type of audience that responds positively to this, each of these new videos he releases incites a new torrent of online harassment aimed at Maza. This is a very common tactic in this corner of YouTube. Build an audience of bigots through demagoguery, mention a marginalized person in an unfavorable light, deny all culpability when that person is mobbed with harassment. It gives the instigator the perfect alibi. I didn't tell my audience to harass anyone. How am I responsible for what people in my audience decide to do? It's also worth mentioning that many people aren't fully aware of the sheer volume of harassment we're talking about here. I have a fairly thick skin, so one person calling me a slur one time, it sucks, but hey, it happens. Not that big of a deal, right? Now imagine hundreds of people calling you slurs every day for years on end. That's the level of dogpiling that some targets have to deal with. Some critics will respond with, well, then just don't go online. And this is the crux of the problem. This is what people mean when they say that letting hate speech go unchecked is a greater threat to free speech than censoring it. The aim of hate speech is to shut down the speech of others. So when people targeted with hate speech just don't go online anymore, that means the person spouting the hate speech has gotten exactly what they want. They've seized control of the dialogue and chased away opposing points of view. Carlos Maza compiled a montage of Crowder's hate speech and tweeted about it. YouTube responded by saying they would look into it, and 5 days later they came back saying they would do basically nothing. They demonetized Crowder's channel with the caveat that they would remonetize it if Crowder removed links to his t-shirt store where he sells shirts that say socialism is for f***s. Merchandise that probably earns him a whole lot more than ad revenue would anyway. It's also worth noting that YouTube has a well-documented history of demonetizing videos that contain the word transgender or discuss other LGBT-related topics. In effect, they seem to be treating pro-LGBT content that doesn't violate YouTube's terms of service as being equal to anti-LGBT content that does. Crowder's actions are infuriating, but the larger issue here is that YouTube has willfully failed to enforce its own stated policies. In their own words, YouTube claims that while Crowder's videos clearly contain hurtful language, they do not violate YouTube's policies regarding harassment and hate speech. A policy which ostensibly includes hurtful comments and content promoting hatred against individuals based on sexual orientation. If calling someone a lispy queer for 2 years while wearing a t-shirt that says socialism is for f***s doesn't fall under the category of harassment or hate speech based on sexual orientation, then what does? Why would YouTube allow all this to happen? Why would a company that turns its logo into a rainbow and supposedly celebrates LGBT voices so completely and utterly fail to protect its users from homophobic harassment? The answer to that is very simple. Hate speech is profitable. At the end of the day, what is a hate mob other than a large group of people unified around a common cause? Very easy to mobilize and very quick to engage with new content that appeals to their hatred. Hate speech generates engagement, and engagement is YouTube's bottom line. This is why YouTube's algorithms and recommended videos inevitably seem to lead people towards the most extreme, sensationalist content. YouTube's Up Next recommendation system is responsible for over 70% of all time spent on YouTube. It's not simply designed to recommend content you might be interested in, it's designed to keep you on YouTube. Tristan Harris, a former design ethicist at Google, said the following regarding YouTube's algorithms. There's a spectrum on YouTube between the calm section, the Walter Cronkite Carl Sagan part, and Crazy Town, where the extreme stuff is. If I'm YouTube and I want you to watch more, I'm always going to steer you toward Crazy Town. Whenever these types of conversations come up, there inevitably come protests of, so you're just trying to silence everyone who disagrees with you. As if what Crowder and his ilk are doing amounts to a simple difference of opinion. As if calling a gay Cuban American a lispy queer Mexican for 2 years was some sort of debatable viewpoint that's supposed to be politely refuted. There's this myth perpetuated by a lot of right-wing news outlets that social platforms go out of their way to disproportionately silence conservative voices. I think that's at least part of why YouTube has refused to take action here, because they're afraid of being accused of having a liberal bias. But the fact of the matter is that harassment and hate speech from the right wing are given incredible amounts of latitude by these platforms. Anyone who spends any extended period of time on social media will tell you that these platforms, especially YouTube, are teeming with far-right extremists whose behavior goes largely unchecked. A study from Bellingcat that examined 75 fascist activists found that right-wing personalities on YouTube were the most common entry point into white nationalism and the alt-right. The only time that high-profile harassers do seem to get banned from these platforms is when the negative press of their actions is judged to have outweighed the engagement that they generate. Milo Yiannopoulos wasn't banned from Twitter for being conservative. If that were the case, he'd have been banned well before 2016 when he'd already violated Twitter's terms of service multiple times. Instead, he got banned after he inspired a wave of racist harassment aimed at actress Leslie Jones. Twitter only intervened after Yiannopoulos targeted a high-profile celebrity and the bad press outweighed the engagement. But Rantasmo, you might ask, if YouTube is so full of awful people and does such a bad job protecting its queer user base, then why are you still on YouTube? And to be perfectly honest, that's kind of a good question. This situation has me kind of at a loss as to the best course of action. Do I continue publishing videos to YouTube, tacitly endorsing the platform and its negligence and exploitation of queer creators? Or do I boycott YouTube and take my videos to a different platform, one where I probably won't get nearly as large of an audience, in effect deplatforming my own voice and making barely any dent in YouTube's income in the first place? There's not really an easy answer here. So right now, my strategy, the best strategy I can think of, is to use my platform, modest as it is, to try to put pressure on YouTube to enforce their stated policies with regard to harassment and hate speech, and to encourage other creators to do the same. Because here's the thing, it's going to get so much worse now. YouTube has essentially provided harassers with a guidebook to bullying people with no repercussions. They've basically come out and said, hey, you want to harass someone? You want to call someone slurs for 2 years? You want to amass a throng of bloodthirsty followers that you can sick on anyone you deem worthy of your ire? Here's how to do it and not suffer any real consequences. YouTube has created a monster that it's afraid to do anything about, and it's time to let them know that this isn't acceptable anymore. If they want to brand themselves as celebrating LGBT pride, if they want to capitalize on the work of queer people, if they want to wear that rainbow with any amount of credibility, they need to start doing better. Because our time, the time that queer creators spend making content, my time, is worth something. And Daddy has things to do.